November 1951. MiG Alley, North Korea. The sky was a bruised purple, fading into a cold, hard blue. At 40,000 feet, the air was thin enough to kill a man in seconds and cold enough to freeze sweat inside a flight suit. Captain Jack "Ripper" Reynolds didn't mind the cold. He minded the boredom. He sat strapped into the cockpit of his F-86 Sabre, a swept-wing silver bullet of American engineering. The J-47 turbojet engine hummed behind him, a vibration he could feel in his teeth. "Yellow leader to yellow 2, Reynolds radioed, his voice sounding tinny in the oxygen mask. "Check your 6, Sparky. You're drifting." "Copy, leader," came the nervous reply of Lieutenant Miller, his wingman. "Just looking at the river, sir. It looks quiet." Reynolds looked down. Far below, the Yalu River snaked through the mountains like a jagged scar. That river was the border. South of it was war. North of it was China, the sanctuary. American pilots were strictly forbidden from crossing it. But that's where the MiGs lived. The Soviet-built MiG-15s were ugly, brutish machines. They had high tails, snub noses, and cannons that fired shells the size of oranges. And lately they had been aggressive. "Don't get comfortable, kid," Reynolds muttered, scanning the horizon. "They don't show up on radar until they're already eating your lunch." Reynolds was an ace. He had 6 kills painted on the nose of his Sabre, which he had named Bad News. He flew by instinct, by the seat of his pants. He knew the Sabre was a better plane in a dive, but the MiG could climb faster and turn tighter. It was a deadly game of rock, paper, scissors played at 600 miles per hour. The sun spot. Reynolds squinted into the sun. It was an old trick. Fly out of the blinding light so the enemy can't see you. He saw a glint, just a flash, like a diamond reflecting light. "Brake left," Reynolds screamed, slamming the stick over. "Brake left, Sparky. Bandits. 6 o'clock high." He didn't wait for a confirmation. He hauled the Sabre into a violent bank. Tracers, bright, glowing lines of death, whipped past his canopy. They were huge 37mm cannon shells. If one of them hit, his plane would disintegrate. "They jumped us," Sparky yelled, panic rising in his voice. "I see 4. No, 6. 8 of them." It was a wolf pack. A squadron of MiGs had been loitering high above, waiting for the Americans to get lazy. "Stay with me, too," Reynolds ordered. "Drop tanks. Let's dance." He pulled the lever to jettison his external fuel tanks. The Sabre, suddenly lighter and more aerodynamic, leaped forward. Reynolds pulled back on the stick, pulling the nose up into a vertical climb. He wanted to trade speed for altitude. He wanted to get behind them. But these weren't ordinary North Korean pilots. They were good. Too good. "Russian honchos," Reynolds gritted his teeth. Intelligence rumors said that Soviet veterans from World War II were secretly flying for the North Koreans. They spoke Russian on the radio and flew like demons. One silver MiG-15 broke formation and latched onto Reynolds' tail. The duel. "I can't shake him," Sparky screamed. "He's all over me." Reynolds looked back. Sparky was in trouble. 2 MiGs were chasing the rookie, chewing up the sky around him. Reynolds had a choice. Save himself or dive into the fire to save the kid. It wasn't a choice. "Hang on, Sparky. I'm coming." Reynolds kicked the rudder and rolled the Sabre upside down. He pulled the stick into his gut, diving straight down in a split-S maneuver. The G-forces hit him immediately. Gravity. It was the invisible enemy. At 4G, your head feels like it weighs 50 pounds. At 5G, your vision starts to narrow. The world loses color, gray out. At 6G, the blood drains from your brain into your legs. Reynolds grunted, using the hick maneuver, tensing his stomach muscles to force blood back to his head. He leveled out behind the MiGs chasing Sparky. "Eat lead," Reynolds whispered. He squeezed the trigger. His 6.50 caliber machine guns roared. A stream of incendiary bullets sawed through the wing of the trailing MiG. Smoke poured out. The MiG spun away. "Splash one," Reynolds yelled. But he had lost his energy. He was low and slow. and the leader of the wolf pack saw him, the Red Baron of the Yalu. A MiG with a red nose, the mark of a squadron leader, dived on Reynolds from above. "Leader!" "Hi!" Sparky warned. Reynolds looked up. The red MiG was coming down like a hammer. His cannons were sparking. Reynolds did the only thing he could. He pushed the throttle to the firewall and went into a power dive. The Sabre shook. The airspeed indicator vibrated past Mach 0.9. The ground was rushing up to meet him. The MiG followed. "You want to play chicken?" Reynolds hissed. "Let's see who blinks first." He pulled the stick back. Hard. He wanted to pull out of the dive at the last possible second, forcing the MiG to either crash into the mountains or overshoot him. The Sabre screamed in protest. The wings flexed. The G-meter spiked.
Septynicus, astonicus.
Reynolds' G-suit inflated, squeezing his legs like a vice, trying to keep the blood in his upper body. But 8GS was crushing. It felt like a truck was parked on his chest. He couldn't breathe. His vision turned into a tunnel. The blue sky turned gray, then dark gray. "Come on!" Reynolds gasped. Just a little more. He saw the MiG in his rearview mirror. The Russian was still there. Reynolds pulled harder. A desperate, suicidal turn.
Devinicus.
The lights went out. One moment, Reynolds was a warrior fighting for his life. The next moment, there was nothing. No sound. No pain. Just black. His hands went limp on the controls. His head slumped forward. The F-86 Sabre, carrying an unconscious pilot, was screaming toward the jagged peaks of Korea at 700 miles per hour. The dream. In the darkness, Reynolds wasn't in a cockpit. He was back home in Texas. He was sitting on a porch drinking iced tea. It was quiet, peaceful. "Jack," a voice said. "Wake up." "I'm tired," Reynolds mumbled in the dream. "Jack, you're going to miss the show." "What show?" "The fireworks." Suddenly, the iced tea glass in his hand exploded. The porch collapsed. The sound of a jet engine roared in his ears, louder than God. The awakening. Slap. Reynolds didn't wake up slowly. He woke up violently. His eyes snapped open. His brain was rebooting, struggling to process where he was. Pain. Everywhere. His neck felt broken. His lungs were burning. He looked out the canopy. The world was spinning. No, the world was fine. He was spinning. The ground was terrifyingly close. Maybe 2,000 feet. He had passed out for how long? 10 seconds? 20? The Sabre had leveled itself out slightly due to its aerodynamic stability, but it was drifting aimlessly. Reynolds grabbed the stick. His hands felt heavy, like they belonged to someone else. He leveled the wings. "Yellow leader, respond." Sparky was screaming on the radio, sounding like he was crying. "Jack, they're all over us. Where are you?" Reynolds shook his head, trying to clear the fog. The GLOC, G-force-induced loss of consciousness, had left him feeling drunk and hyperfocused at the same time. Adrenaline was dumping into his system in a toxic overdose. He looked at his altimeter. He was low. In the weeds. He looked up. What he saw made his blood run cold. And then it made it boil. The ambush hadn't ended. It had turned into a massacre. Sparky's plane was smoking, limping back south. And surrounding him were 4 MiGs. They were toying with him, like cats with a half-dead mouse. They weren't shooting to kill yet. They were taking turns making slashing runs, terrifying the rookie. Something inside Reynolds snapped. The logical part of his brain, the part that feared death, the part that obeyed regulations, was still asleep. The part that woke up was pure instinct. Predator. Reynolds didn't check his fuel. He didn't check his ammo count. He slammed the throttle forward and pulled the stick back. The Sabre roared, climbing up from the valley floor like a missile from hell. "Hold on, Sparky," Reynolds whispered. His voice sounded different, dead calm. "Daddy's home." The ascent. Jack Reynolds was a ghost. His body was operating on pure muscle memory. The blood rushed back into his head, bringing a sharp, metallic taste to his mouth. His vision was crystal clear, sharper than it had ever been. He was coming up from beneath the MiGs. They were focused on Sparky, the wounded bird. They didn't see the hawk rising from the valley floor. Fox 3, Reynolds whispered. No radio call. No warning. He closed the distance at Mach 0.95. The airframe shuddered as it approached the sound barrier. Target 1, the sadist. The first MiG was lining up a kill shot on Sparky. The pilot was probably grinning, his thumb hovering over the cannon trigger. Reynolds didn't use his gun sight. He used the force. He pulled the nose up, leading the target by 50 yards. BRRRRRT. A 2-second burst. The 6M3 Browning machine guns in the Saber's nose spat out 120 rounds per second. It was a chainsaw of lead. The bullets stitched a line from the MiG's tail to its cockpit. The canopy shattered. The pilot slumped. The MiG rolled violently to the right and exploded in a fireball. 1, Reynolds counted. Target 2, the wingman. The second MiG pilot saw his leader vaporize. He panicked. Instead of climbing, he broke hard left, a rookie mistake. He bled off all his speed. Reynolds was moving too fast to turn with him. He was going to overshoot. Air brakes. Reynolds popped the speed brakes on the fuselage. The Saber bucked like a wild horse, decelerating violently. The G-forces slammed him forward into his straps. He slid right in behind the second MiG. He was so close he could see the rivets on the enemy's fuselage. He could see the red star. The MiG pilot tried to dive. Too late, Reynolds growled. He squeezed the trigger. Click. Only 2 guns fired. The others were jammed or empty. Come on, you piece of junk, Reynolds shouted. He kicked the rudder, walking the tracers onto the MiG's left wing. The fuel tank inside the wing ignited. The wing sheared off. The MiG spiraled down into the mountains like a burning leaf. 2. The furball. The remaining 2 MiGs realized they weren't hunting a wounded rookie anymore. They were locked in a cage with a tiger. They were the honchos, the veterans. They didn't run. They turned to fight. Yellow leader. They're coming for you, Sparky screamed. Get out of there. Go home, Sparky, Reynolds said calmly.
I'm Busse.
The 2 MiGs executed a perfect thatch weave, crossing paths to cover each other's tails. It was a defensive maneuver that made them almost impossible to hit. Reynolds pulled his Saber into a vertical loop. He was trading his last bit of airspeed for altitude. He wanted to come down on top of them. He crested the loop, inverted. He looked down through the top of his canopy. The 2 MiGs were below him, crossing. Reynolds chopped the throttle to idle and dropped the nose. He fell like a stone. Target 3, the snapshot. He fell through their formation. It was madness. He wasn't dogfighting, he was jousting. As he plummeted past the 3rd MiG, he had a firing window of less than half a second. A snapshot. He yanked the stick back and kicked right rudder. The Saber's nose swung wildly. For a microsecond, the MiG filled his windscreen. He held down the trigger. The last of his ammo for the 2 working guns sprayed out. He didn't see an explosion. He just saw pieces fly off the MiG. The elevator. The rudder. The crippled MiG pitched up violently, stalled, and fell into a flat spin. The pilot ejected. Reynolds saw the parachute bloom. 3. The final duel. 1 left. The red nose. The leader. This was the guy who had chased Reynolds into the GLOC dive. The guy who had tried to kill him. Reynolds checked his ammo counter. It read 0. He checked his fuel. The warning light was blinking red. Bingo fuel. He had enough to get home or enough to fight for 1 minute. Not both. The red MiG circled around. He knew Reynolds was empty. He could see the smoke trailing from the Saber's gun ports. The Russian pilot pulled up alongside Reynolds. Close. Wingtip to wingtip. Reynolds looked across the gap. He saw the pilot's face in the oxygen mask. The Russian raised a hand. He wasn't saluting. He was making a throat-cutting gesture. The Russian knew he had won. He was going to drift back, get on Reynolds' tail, and blow him out of the sky with his cannons. Reynolds looked at his instrument panel. He had nothing left.
No bullets.
No speed. No friends. Wait, he had one thing. The master arm switch for the external stores. He had jettisoned his drop tanks earlier, Or had he? He looked at the indicators. The right tank had dropped. The left tank light was still green. A malfunction. It was still hanging under his wing, full of jet fuel, dragging him down. A 100-gallon bomb of kerosene. Reynolds smiled. Cold, terrifying smile. "You want to kill?" Reynolds whispered. "Here, catch." The Russian pilot drifted back, sliding into the kill position behind Reynolds. He was lining up his sights. Reynolds waited. He watched the MiG in his mirror. Closer. The MiG was 100 yards back. Closer. 50 yards. The Russians' cannon ports flared. Now! Reynolds hauled the stick hard left and hit the manual release lever for the stuck drop tank. The heavy aluminum tank, filled with fuel, detached from the left wing. But because Reynolds was banking hard, the tank didn't fall straight down. It tumbled backward into the slipstream, directly into the path of the Russian jet. The impact, the Russian pilot never saw it coming. 1 second he was aiming at a helpless American. The next, a massive silver object smashed into his air intake. The drop tank shattered on impact. 100 gallons of jet fuel were ingested instantly by the MiG's jet engine. The engine didn't just stall. It detonated. A massive fireball erupted from the rear of the MiG. The turbine blades shattered, turning into shrapnel that shredded the fuselage from the inside out. The MiG disintegrated in mid-air. No yexchen. Just a cloud of fire and debris. 4, Reynolds whispered. The long way home. The sky was quiet. Reynolds leveled his wings. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him shaking uncontrollably. His head throbbed. "Yellow leader." Sparky's voice crackled, weak but alive. "Jack? Are you there?" Reynolds looked at his fuel gauge. Needle on the peg. He was running on fumes. He looked at the 4 columns of black smoke rising from the mountains below. "I'm here, Sparky," Reynolds said. His voice was raspy. "I'm coming home. Did you get them?" Reynolds looked at his empty guns. He looked at his missing drop tank. He rubbed his sore neck where the G-force had nearly killed him. "Yeah, kid," Reynolds sighed. "I got 'em." He turned the battered Sabre south, gliding toward the river, toward safety. He had been asleep for 10 seconds. He had been awake for 30, and in that half-minute he had become a legend. The silence. The J-47 jet engine is a loud beast. It screams. It roars. It vibrates the very marrow of your bones. But when it stops, the silence is heavier than the noise. 10 miles from Kimpo Air Base, the fuel gauge in Captain Jack Reynolds' Sabre finally hit absolute zero. The engine coughed once, a dry, hacking sound, and then died. The flame-out warning light glowed on the dashboard. The generator went offline. The cockpit grew quiet, save for the rush of wind over the plexiglass. "Mayday, mayday," Reynolds said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Kimpo Tower, this is Yellow Leader. Engine flameout. 10 miles north. Angels 5, 5,000 feet. I am dead stick." Dead stick meant flying without power. A 30-ton metal glider falling out of the sky. "Copy, Yellow Leader." The tower controller's voice cracked with tension. "We are clearing the runway. Emergency vehicles rolling. Can you make it?" Reynolds looked at the runway in the distance. It looked like a toothpick. He looked at his altitude. He was dropping 2,000 feet per minute. "I don't know," Reynolds said, "but I'm not ejecting. I'm bringing her in." He wasn't trying to save the plane for the Air Force. He was trying to save the gun camera film. Without that film, nobody would believe what happened in those 30 seconds. The glide. He managed his energy carefully. If he flew too fast, he'd overshoot the runway and crash into the rice paddies. If he flew too slow, he'd stall and fall out of the sky like a brick. "Gear down," Reynolds whispered. He pulled the emergency release handle. Gravity dropped the landing gear. Thump, thump, thump. The drag slowed him down. The runway rushed up to meet him. He was coming in hot. "Too fast, Jack," he muttered to himself. "You're coming in too fast." He crossed the runway threshold at 180 knots. He flared the nose, trying to bleed off speed. The wheels slammed into the concrete. Screech. Smoke poured from the tires. The Sabre bounced, settled, and screamed down the runway. Reynolds stomped on the brakes. The hydraulic pressure was fading. The brakes were mushy. The end of the runway was approaching fast. Beyond it was a ditch and a minefield. Stop! Stop! The jet groaned. The tires locked up, shredding rubber. The Sabre skidded sideways, the wingtips sparking against the asphalt. It slid off the end of the runway, plowed through a fence, and came to rest nose-deep in a mud bank. Silence returned. The evidence. Minutes later, the fire trucks arrived. Foam sprayed over the steaming jet. Reynolds didn't move. He sat in the cockpit, staring at the instrument panel. His hands were shaking so hard he couldn't unbuckle his harness. The canopy flew open. It was Sparky. The rookie had landed minutes earlier. Jack! Jack! Sparky was grabbing his shoulders, checking for blood. Are you hit? Reynolds looked at him. Did you see it, Sparky? See what? The tank. The last one. Sparky's eyes went wide. I saw a fireball, Jack. I thought it was you. Reynolds unclipped his oxygen mask. He took a deep breath of fresh air. It smelled of mud and burnt rubber. Get the film, Reynolds rasped. Tell the crew chief to pull the gun camera film. Guard it with your life. The debriefing room was crowded. Colonel Iron Mike, the wing commander, stood at the front of the room. He looked skeptical. Let me get this straight, Captain, the colonel said, crossing his arms. You claim you engaged for MiG-15s alone. You claim you shot down 3 with guns and the 4th one. You claim you killed him by dropping a fuel tank in his face. Yes, sir. A few pilots in the back of the room chuckled. Sounded like a tall tale. A bar story. And you did all this? The colonel continued, looking at the medical report. Immediately after waking up from G-induced unconsciousness? Yes, sir. I was angry. The colonel sighed. Jack, you're a good pilot, but GLOC can cause hallucinations. It messes with your memory. Maybe you saw 1 MiG and got lucky. But 4. The door opened. The intelligence officer walked in, carrying a reel of film. Sir, the officer said, the film is developed. Play it, the colonel ordered. The room went dark. The projector whirred to life. The film. On the screen, the grainy black and white footage began. Kill 1, the footage showed the first MiG. The crosshairs led the target perfectly. The MiG disintegrated under the hail of bullets. Solid kill, the colonel nodded. Kill 2. The camera shook violently as Reynolds deployed air brakes. The second MiG filled the screen. The tracers walked up the wing. The wing sheared off. The room went quiet. 2 kills in 10 seconds. Kill 3. The snapshot. The footage was a blur. The MiG flashed across the screen for a millisecond. Pieces flew off. My God, someone whispered. He hit him in a vertical pass. The 4th kill. The screen showed nothing but empty sky. The ammo counter on the film showed 000. See? The colonel said. You were out of ammo, Reynolds. Wait, Reynolds said. Watch. The camera was still rolling. Reynolds had held the trigger down, hoping the camera was linked to the electrical system, recording his last desperate gamble. On the screen, the horizon tilted crazily. Then the view looked backward, rear-facing camera, standard on some Sabres for kill confirmation. A MiG-15 was right there. Huge. Predator's close. Then, a dark shape detached from Reynolds' wing. The drop tank. Tumbled lazily. The MiG pilot tried to bank, but it was too late. The tank smashed into the nose. The film turned white. A massive explosion engulfed the enemy plane. The reel ended. The film flapped against the projector. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Nobody spoke. The pilots sat in stunned silence. The colonel stared at the blank screen, his mouth slightly open. Finally, Sparky broke the silence. That, Sparky whispered, was the craziest thing I have ever seen. The colonel turned to Reynolds. He stood up straight and saluted. Congratulations, Major, the colonel said. Captain, sir, Reynolds corrected. I said Major, son. You just became an ace in a day. We don't let captains do that. The legend. Jack Reynolds didn't fly combat missions for a month after that. The flight surgeon grounded him for extreme fatigue and G-force trauma. But the story didn't rest. It spread across the base, then across the theater, then to the enemy. Intelligence intercepts from the Russian pilots mentioned a silver devil that rose from the dead. They said he flew like a madman, ignoring the laws of physics. They said he didn't need guns to kill you. Reynolds eventually went back to the cockpit. He survived the war with 10 confirmed kills. But he never repeated that day. He never tried to. Years later, when asked about the 30 seconds of hell, Reynolds would just shake his head and smile. I wasn't flying the plane that day, he would say. I was asleep. The dragon was flying. Epilogue. The F-86 Sabre Bad News was repaired and put back into service. But the crew chief painted a new symbol on the fuselage, right next to the red stars marking the kills. It wasn't a star. It was a small, white picture of a toilet. Because, as the crew chief said, the captain threw everything at him but the kitchen sink. So I figured a drop tank is close enough to a toilet. The end.